Right. I think we've got most of the group here. Maybe give it another 30 seconds. We have a great gathering this evening. For those of you who are joining, my name is Stacy. I'm the Director of Development for the Glacier National Park Conservancy. And if you're tuning in and haven't been in a book club for a bit, or if you're new, you might be wondering, where's Doug? What's going on? So as most of you all know, Doug Mitchell retired in the spring. We're very happy for him. And so you'll be seeing a new couple of new and or familiar faces hosting book club for the remainder of the year. So I was super excited when we were talking about the books and Baited came up because when I read that it has drama, there's a whodunit, I was like, okay, I want to be a part of that. To start this off, though, I do want to take a moment for you all I want to introduce Tag and Vine. He is our new president. He joined us at the end of May. And so this is his first book club. And so Tag, and if you have any words you'd like to say.
Yeah, well, it's a pleasure to virtually meet you all. This is quite a club. There's a lot of faces and names up there. Some that I recognize. Hi, friends from other places. Good to see you all, and just proud to be a part of the organization and the impact it's having in our park. And really excited to be part of an incredible team. And thanks to you all for being part of our magic and special sauce that helps us support the park and do those extra things that really need to be done. I've really enjoyed learning a lot more about the parts of the park that I didn't experience. I knew the trails and some of those things, but some of the other education programs and lots of the other things around the park I haven't had experience in. So I'm very excited to be part of this and experience all the park has, as well as be a part of the solution to meet any challenges that may come our way.
Awesome, thank you. And I would like to point out Tagan's background. So if you all don't get our daily update, I highly recommend it. Glacier has been having some incredible sunrises lately and sunsets, and that's actually included in time lapses in our daily update. It shows everything from Tumed to Mini Glacier to Logan Pass to Apgar, and it's just been it's so much fun because I'm not awake for sunrise these days. Sunrise is around 5:30 a.m. And so it's kind of fun to find out what was happening in the sky while I was asleep. And the same can sometimes be said for sunset when our sun's setting, around 9-ish, 9:30. So anyway, just a little plug for our daily update if you'd like to see sunrises and sunsets and all that's happening in the park. Well, all right. I'm super excited to welcome Colleen O'Brien to our book club. We had a chance to chat a week or so ago, and I think this will be a lot of fun. So Colleen is joining us tonight from East Glacier. So I think that's part of the story. We're going to spend a lot of time in East Glacier as we read this book. And one thing, if you have not joined book club before, but if you have, feel free to ask questions, put them in the chat. You can put in thoughts, comments, questions, anything. We love hearing what people have their thoughts, and I might call on people, but Amy will definitely be asking for questions throughout the book club. So don't be shy, put your thoughts and questions in there. But Colleen, first, I want to turn it over to you. I would love for you to share a little bit about yourself, who you are, your history in East Glacier. And now that you're, Kalispell East Glacier, share a little bit about that.
Certainly. So my name is Colleen O'Brien. I came to Glacier sometime in the late 80s. I took a vacation here and I was struck by the thought, oh my goodness, some people get to live here. And the rest of my adult life has been this quest to get to be near Glacier Park. I feel like the novel kind of originated out of the fact that a lot of my dreams had come true. I was living in East Glacier. I'd gotten married. I'd gotten to start a family. And I was actually making a living near Glacier Park, which felt like a huge feat in and of itself. And so when I set out to write a novel, I knew I wanted to set it in Glacier Park.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to throw out the first obvious question. When you read the book, it's like, woo, are any of these experiences based on real world observations or scenarios? One thing Colleen did not mention, she was actually a part of Glacier Trail Crew for a couple of years. And so as you read the book, we're reading about NPS rangers who, they may or may not behave how we want our rangers to behave. We have a bear biologist study. There's obviously a lot of drama. There's a lot of, I saw it somewhere, misdeeds and mishaps. And so just talk about, as you wrote the story, what were your thoughts?
when I was working trail crew, and even I also worked as a permit writer at the Two Med Ranger Station, um, there were so many amazing people that I got to work with. And I feel like that's one of the great things about Glacier. It's just this place of extremes. You just mentioned the daylight. Like this time of year, the daylight is extraordinary. Along about November, we get darkness that's closing in, kind of like a stop down aperture on a 35 millimeter camera. We get the temperature swings, we get the wind, we get the weather. Here on the east side, we get the plains meeting the mountains and rising up to meet them. And I feel like so many of us have a proprietary kind of sense about the park. We feel like Glacier is our park. And I'm so honored to be here with the Conservancy because you guys really champion both Glacier Park and books, and those are both dear to my heart. Um, so, with all of these extremes, I feel like one of the things that happens in Glacier, and one of the reasons why so many of us love it and are drawn to it and want to champion it, um, is because we get worn down by the extremes and by the intensity of the place. And we don't have any energy for pretense. So we're just our true selves. And that's when you can have really good relationships with people and really a great relationship with a place. Um, so I was working in the park, and the people I was working with were first and foremost hilarious. And then many of them were just genuinely kind and good. And so many of them had experiences in the park that I was just enthralled by and envious of. So there are lines in the park that definitely I heard people say, and it was like someone needs to write that down and use it somewhere, at some point. So the book is fiction, and the people are fiction, and the events are fiction. But I was inspired by the people that I worked with, the different kinds of people with the different roles in the park. I was also inspired because while I was working for the park in the summers, I was working at Blackfeet Community College teaching English in the winters. And my first summer on trail crew coincided with the DNA study really taking place here along the east side. My colleagues at the college were enthralled by the technology. So it was 2004, DNA was new. It was just so exciting that you could take a hair follicle and from that type an individual bear, and from that extrapolate a population estimate. Meanwhile, when I hired on with the trail crew guys, some of them were very skeptical, in part because the DNA folks were going to be pouring lure near the camps that many of them had camped at for decades. The Park Service obviously tells all of us, anyone who who recreates in the backcountry, you need to be careful with your food and attractants. And then suddenly they were sanctioning people actually intentionally pouring attractant and manipulating the bears' movements near where the trail crew worked and camped. So there was, in my mind, inherent tension there. The trail crew folks were also skeptical of the study because they wondered why the numbers were wanted, and they were concerned that perhaps all of this would lead to the delisting of grizzly bears and the hunting of grizzly bears. And here we are, 22 years later. It hasn't happened yet, but it seems to be constantly in the news, the idea of delisting and returning management to the states and then possible hunting. So it just seemed like the setup was there for some tension where I understood sort of both sides. And I think that's when compelling stories happen, when they're sort of like competing ideas, but they're both reasonable. And, not everyone's going to agree on everything, but hopefully we can disagree respectfully and try to understand where one another's coming from.
I love that. And to go back to the very beginning, one of the things you were talking about is the daylight. And one of the things I liked is when you started the book, we're talking about the March timeframe. And a lot of places, March is spring, it's beautiful, it's sunny. March on the east side of the park is still very much winter. And so to kind of talk and know what's happening in Bab in March, I hate to say it. And one of the things I think in your book, you talk about the East Side calls people because who can make it on the East Side all year? It's a very different lifestyle. And there might be a bluebird day and you're like, yes, I'm going to go to the East Side, but then those winds will get you. And then also, so much of the story is taking place in June, where June has its highs and lows. It has the most wonderful, you've got your hours of daylight. It's still winter. Mountain passes are still covered in snow. So as stories taking place, you're talking about the wildflowers, but then during the search for Liz, you're talking about this raging creek. And I'm like, that is icy cold. That is snow melt. It is frigid. And so I love just kind of, having that mindset of someone who spends a lot of time in the park and going, June, just as we were wrapping up June, we're evacuating Mini Glacier because of floods. I was like, it is very much a month that can have everything. And so to have a story taking place in that time frame in the East Side, I was like, oh, it's wild. It's the Wild West. It's the Wild East in this case. I want to share a quote, a little review by Deborah Magpie Erling, who hopefully some of you joined us for that book club last month when we had Deborah. Colleen O'Brien cast a wicked, believable spell of deceit and heartbreak, a burn of a tale that begins to bubble and hiss and then rapidly boil over. Imagine taking a walk in the woods with friends who have heartbreaking and monumental secrets to tell. Now imagine those friends are in Montana and the intertwine of their communal stories will take you to the edge of a precipice. Like all good mysteries, the story will catch you up. Baited is an intricately plotted masterpiece, a stunning edge of your seat drama, an exquisite all-night read. I mean, she captures it exactly because I'm one of those people normally I'm a Kindle reader, but I'm reading my book in bed and it bops me in the head as I'm falling asleep. And I'm like, no, 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 you got to keep it going. And if I'd happen to wake up in the morning, I was like, okay, a few more pages. What's going on? Because for the longest time, I was like, where's Ezra? And so, yeah, you did just an exceptional job capturing that. But I do want to go back to the very beginning of the story. One, thank you for including a cast of characters. Super helpful. I don't know about you all, but I did have to flip back to it quite frequently. And also the map, I think very handy. It's always fun when you have a book that captures geography of a place and a place, honestly, a lot of us don't spend a lot of time or may not be familiar with. So thank you for those two things. But to go back in the beginning of the book, we're introduced to Maureen, Grady, and Josie. And halfway through the book, I'm like, what happened to Maureen? Why do we care? I mean, was that kind of your thought from the onset? Is like, I'm going to introduce these characters and then tease you for the remainder of the book?
My intention certainly wasn't to tease. So I wrote the book over the course of between when I started and when I was holding a book in my hand. It was about 15 years. So one of the things that happened is I had to keep myself interested in writing it. And as I did so, these characters would come out of nowhere. And Maureen was kind of one of them, where, I started out with the idea of the DNA study and someone going missing. And I really have to credit Deborah Erling because at first I set out to just write an outdoor mystery, just a real simple whodunit with some characters who were purely evil. And I don't know if you folks have read like the C.J. Box books or the Walt Longmire series. Paul Doiron also writes a series about a Maine game warden. They're all really fun, but I did feel like there was maybe room in the genre for something with fewer gun calibers and maybe a few more females. So I set out to write just an outdoor mystery. And then I remembered Deborah Erling telling us in class, I was her student, that, don't bother to be a writer without heart. If you're going to tell a story, really dig in. And so I realized I needed to give these characters their due. What I wanted to offer the reader was a plausible mystery. So Maureen came to me, this idea of someone who had faked cancer. And I also needed, just from a plotting standpoint, like, what was Ezra doing on the East Side when he would have encountered Josie? And I'd known a woman that we work with here on the East Side who had cancer, and her husband was so concerned about her immune system that he had folks build her a trail. So that part was real. And when you had asked earlier about what's real or what's not, some of the jumping off points, I think I'd call them. They were things that I'd heard about that were like either so compelling, like that, which is, it's like the sweetest thing for a husband to do, to, build his wife a private trail. Um, I think I kind of lost my train of thought there, but getting back to your question a little bit, I wanted to offer the reader a plausible outdoor mystery, representing actual people on the East Side. And I wanted the experience, something like I've had reading certain books where you're reading it and you really want to know what happened. And when you find out what happened, it makes perfect sense, even though for much of the book you maybe couldn't have called it. So that's what I was kind of shooting for.
Well, you succeeded because I don't know if any others did this, but I got to the end of the book and then I started flipping back and almost rereading sections again and being like, okay, I missed that detail, or okay, that makes sense. But what's, and this is, I think, kind of starting the base of the whole story is, it's like, who do we point the finger at? It's, you kind of almost go back to Fred at the very beginning. His act of deceit, his adultery created this spiral that had so many tentacles and touched so many people's lives because he did, he was cheating, but then he does do this very amazing things for his wife by building a trail. But then you have the Ezra storyline. So it was just fascinating to be like, man, so many of you people, if you just were better humans or just, didn't misbehave so much, it'd be a very different story. But honestly, humans were flaws. These are, some people did things that were a lot worse than others, but that's human nature.
Well, and I think that gets back to a little bit about your question. Certainly I was inspired by the people that I worked with on the East Side, but I didn't want to let the truth get in the way of a good story. So my kids and I talk about this a lot because we read together, and it's like, stories are compelling in part because people are behaving badly and interesting things are happening, and it doesn't all go, sometimes we'll read like a spy school book and it's like, no, don't open the door, and of course they have to because that's where the trouble is.
Yeah. And like I mentioned, this takes place, it's all in the Cut Bank area, to Medicine. And I will say I've been in Glacier for 5 years, similar to you. I had a first visit to Glacier. Their ownership came over me and I said, I need to live there. I need to move there. And hey, it worked. But I've never been to Cut Bank. Our seasons are so short here. You're so busy exploring. A Cut Bank has very quickly risen to the top of my list. And actually, one of my coworkers camped and did Morningstar last weekend, and another's doing it this weekend. So I was like, okay, Morningstar is on the path. But you're descriptive of these valleys, the wildflowers. So even when terrible things are happening, there's still this beauty that's kind of just on the surface of, okay, you can have that picture of place and go, oh, I want to be there. So talk about these, are these favorite places for you? Or are these kind of where you spend your time hiking if possible? And you don't have to give your secret spots because you also don't want a bunch of people going there, but talk more about these areas.
Oh, for sure. That Cut Bank Valley is my favorite spot. I We always do an anniversary hike, and so I was with my kids, and I was like, so I want my ashes spread at Morningstar, and I was like, but you don't have to tote them in like, a big heavy urn. You can ziplock it, and but you should probably double bag it. And my daughter said, well, do I have to reuse the ziplock? Which I was like, no, no, you don't. But definitely that Cut Bank Valley is just one of my favorite places, in part because not as many people go there. There's the 7 miles of gravel road that kind of keep it a little isolated. It is stunning. And in terms of just wildlife and views, and you can go up to Triple Divide and just know that those three drainages happen right there. So it feels like it's this important spot, like for our whole continent, while it's still so isolated, which I kind of love the juxtaposition of that. To Medicine, I was really fortunate. I got to get married there. We, it is just down the road. Sometimes it's like so close, but yet so far. But that is another favorite spot. I was really fortunate to work at the Park Cafe. Um, in 1994 and again in 2001. So I got to explore up in St. Mary as well. And that is a beautiful area too. I was just up in Many Glacier after the flooding, and you know, not even a flood can really detract from Many Glacier. It's just beautiful too. So the whole east side I just find stunning.
Well, I feel like there's some people who are on the side booking some airfare right now if they haven't been out. So, or if they have been out, and you've definitely kind of cemented the okay, my hiking plans for the next couple weekends will probably include those areas. I did just spend the last weekend in Two Med, and it's just magical. These
Yeah.
places are so special. And I love the fact that you got married in the park and you already know where you want to spread your ashes in the park. And I don't know that that's that unique, because a lot of people, it's very odd how, we just talk about, we don't really talk about dying, but it's like, oh, I'm not dying, but when I do, I want my ashes here. Like that comes up in so many conversations because your heart belongs to Glacier and you've identified a spot that's especially meaningful for you. And so I love hearing that. And I'm sure your kids growing up, oh my gosh, the memories they must have as well of just spending time in the park.
Yes, for sure. And I do just want to acknowledge that, I'm obviously I don't live next to other national parks, but I feel like Glacier is really special and unique in the people that it does call to it and who find it so compelling. I know there are a lot of us, and I think it's just a real tribute to this place and its power. Um, and I so appreciate your organization and the way that you just champion the park and support the hardworking folks in the Park Service who are, really walking that line between allowing as much access as possible while making sure that we don't love the place to death and impact it in ways that it can't recover from, which seems to be a real challenge.
No, exactly. And I do appreciate, and as you mentioned it, and the dedication, and for all those who love Glacier Park and treat it with reverence, which I love that that was something you felt compelled to write in your dedication because that's so important of us. We want people to love Glacier. We want people to visit, but please have that reverence. Please have that respect. So thank you for pointing that out. I love that. Let's talk about relationships. So, well, first off, we've got their ongoing tension between trail crew and law enforcement. And what's kind of fun for me is I was picturing the folks I know at NPS in these different roles, and I was like, oh, I wouldn't doubt that some of that still happens because people are so passionate about what they do. And it was just interesting watching that evolve and how they work together or worked against each other. And, just share a little bit more about that.
Well, I think, as humans, we're all looking for love and belonging. So we all kind of find our communities. And because I got to work first as a permit writer, the permit writers, anyone who wears the uniform, there's kind of like that group of folks. And that was really wonderful to belong to. But then there was always this kind of idea that maybe trail crew and getting to be spiked out for 10 days at a time and having all of your stuff packed in with mules, like maybe they were the people who were really had it going on in terms of like how to work for the Park Service and really get to be in the park the most. But there are those different sort of groups, and they're all necessary. And what's really wonderful about Glacier is ultimately they all work together, they all love the place. Um, and there are some different backgrounds. I think that that sort of figures into the novel too, just some different class distinctions. Um, and and that certainly existed when I was working for the Park Service. There were a lot of people who were highly educated and really choosing to devote their time to the park and work these jobs, even though they probably would have had options of working other places. Um, One of the gentlemen that I got to work with on Trail Crew had worked for decades, and he was a legend. And he seriously had probably spent more nights camping in Glacier's backcountry than most people could ever dream of camping anywhere. So he was really inspiring too.
Awesome. Love it. Okay, I'm going to go to questions in a couple minutes, but I have a few more. The relationship and the friendship between Clancy and Ezra. In the book, you mentioned hundreds of miles of clear trail formed the bedrock of her friendship with Ezra. And it was just she had that devotion to him, but then also being very aware of his flaws and finding out more flaws as his story unraveled. Um, Anything you want to share further on that?
I do feel like that's kind of the central emotional tension of the novel is, there are these people that we love and we hold them dear and they're wonderful. And then there are occasionally times when we disappoint each other and we find out that someone has behaved badly. And so it's that ability to hold someone dear while also acknowledging that their behavior was abhorrent and nothing you could condone. I think there's a line in there where she wished that he was alive so that she could give him the hell that he deserved. Um, and I think I've experienced that in my own life. And it is this challenge when you just really like someone and yet you find out that they've done something that you simply, it's not only that you can't condone it, but it's horrible human behavior. So, how do we hold people accountable while at the same time holding them dear was something that I wanted to grapple with.
And then we have Liz and we have Penelope. Passionate, crazy. How would you describe them?
I love them both. And I think there's a line in there where Liz says, it's not enough to love animals. Like, that's a really nice idea, but that's not the world that we live in. And she's absolutely right. I do sometimes bemoan the fact that in order to protect animals under the Endangered Species Act, we have to prove that they need protecting. And in order to do that, we have to count them. And to count them, we have to, collar them or manipulate them or photograph them or somehow impinge on the very creatures that we're hoping to save. Um, and I think that that's kind of unfortunate, but it's the system that we have right now. And it's probably, our best shot at conservation and really protecting these animals that are facing pressure from climate change and all sorts of new threats. If I had my druthers, we would protect all the animals because, when you live in grizzly country or you go for a walk in grizzly country, you do so with a heightened sense of attention and awareness. And there's a real value in that. They help us pay attention. And then if you're fortunate enough to get to see one, it's incredibly humbling. You are very present. You know unequivocally that you're alive. And I feel like there's just value in those experiences and value in having these animals among us. No matter how many there are, there's value in the animals just existing. So I wish we could protect them all, no matter what their numbers.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a great viewpoint because obviously as a conservancy, one of the things we frequently fund is studies and they're monitoring their studies, there's DNA tests, that type of thing. And it is, to look at the big picture and it's like, what impact does it potentially have on the animal, even if it's just for a millisecond, if they're being collared, how quickly does that happen? Um, is it potentially changing maybe their habitat or anything like that? But it's all done in the name of science because the hope is we're protecting the populations, but to have that other viewpoint is super valid. So thank you for sharing. I'm going to turn to Amy. I've been seeing everything in the chat from people want to check out your cabin to everything else. So Amy, do you have some questions you'd like to share?
I sure do. Questions and some comments that I want to share with you, Colleen. So right from the get-go, I feel like our good friend and regular book clubber Janet, she said your experience within the park resonates so beautifully. And as you continue to talk, I think that everybody can agree that yeah, you just have such great experience. It seems like not only in sort of like working for the park, but just like observing relationships. I know one of the first things that I noticed when I came to work for the Conservancy was just like the high level of respect that I have for anybody who works for NPS because people are so very passionate. So whenever I hear people maybe thinking that the park does things for the wrong reason, I'm always like, oh my gosh, everybody needs to meet these folks who are out protecting Glacier because it all comes from the heart and everybody's so passionate. So I'm glad that you also had that experience or have continued to have that experience. So Janet's first question was, and you've talked a little bit about this, but you seem very knowledgeable on DNA studies and just kind of what it has taken for science to exist in the park. So, was there additional research that you did on that? Or tell us more, I guess, about your experience with research in the park.
Um, I'm, I just want to go on record as I am a huge fan of science, and I am a huge fan of wildlife biologists who are out, in the field under all kinds of conditions, um, doing studies and sort of championing wildlife for all of us. I did feel like it was really interesting to me when I joined Trail Crew and they had these opinions that I had not been privy to previously, and that kind of made sense in a way. So I think that that was a side of things that I hadn't really read about when I read media coverage of the DNA study. I hadn't really read this idea that, like, why do they want these numbers? In terms of the novel, I've read pretty much anything I can get my hands on in terms of grizzly bears. And right now, I'm just finishing up Doug Chadwick's The Wolverine Way, which is really a fascinating and a wonderful glacier book about the Wolverine study that was done also about 20 years ago. So that's another great book. I can't say that I went to the library and was like, I'm going to find out about the DNA research. Some of my good fortune was that I was there when the DNA study was first starting. It did the whole northern continental divide ecosystem, not just Glacier, and it spanned many years, so it was extensive. And when we would go for our initial Park Service training, they would include folks from the DNA study who would give presentations. So I was really fortunate to be in on a lot of that. And I think that's where some of the background came. One other thing that I think I haven't said yet, and I would like to, is I am so grateful to people for reading the novel and for being here and spending their time with us. Um, I spent a lot of time writing this, obviously, and without readers, the story really remains untold. So thank you for reading, and thank you for, giving it thought and asking questions and participating here tonight.
Aw, thank you for that. We are always thrilled to do Glacier Book Club and so thankful for the authors who join us. Since you brought it up, Colleen, how long did it take to write this book, or what was your process?
The process was messy. So my family and I, we run some small businesses over here on the east side. I have 3 children, and it was just one of those things. Like, whenever I could snatch away time, I would work on it. I missed being in the park. So one of the ways that I dealt with that was I was working on this novel where I got to be with these characters that were inspired by the people I got to work with when I was in the park. From start to holding a book in my hand, it took 15 years. And thank goodness it didn't get published when I initially thought it was done, because it was a very different book then. So it was a long haul. At one point, my publisher told me that not everyone was obsessed with Glacier Park as I was. And I was sort of stunned by that because I was like, well, where I live, they kind of are. But it's been really nice to have the book out in the world. And I'm just grateful that, people will pick it up and read it. I feel like holding a paper book in our hands might be one of the last vestiges of privacy that we have.
Oh my gosh, yes, yes. It's so wonderful to like sneak away and have a book in hand, right? And just sort of escape for a little bit. So,
Yeah.
okay, I'm going to go back to these questions that folks have put in. So Eric and Tanya want to know, or they say that they found many of the characters in this book were quite unsympathetic for a variety of reasons. And was that sort of intentional, or did the book just sort of evolve that way? And you may have talked about this a little bit before, but
Well, that is interesting for me to hear. I was very fortunate to be in William Kittredge's last writing workshop that he taught. He was at the University of Montana and kind of the star of the creative writing teaching program there, and a wonderful writer himself. But he told us that writers work in the medium of other people's imaginations. So it's interesting for me to hear that, they didn't find characters sympathetic. And I've heard that from other readers as well. I find them all very sympathetic, though flawed. So I wasn't intentionally trying to write, people that someone wouldn't like necessarily. But I was trying to be to portray characters that were complicated in the way that, being a human being is a complicated endeavor, and we aren't always our best selves.
Oh, I like that. Complicated, not necessarily unsympathetic. Complicated. Colleen, I'm just going to warn you, your voice goes in and out just a tad bit. We could hear most all of that, but yeah, just try to keep your voice up. Err on the side of keeping your voice up, not down. And then we'll be able to hang on every word. So Michelle gives us her next comment and question. She says, "Good evening, and thank you so much for another great book club selection." She really, really enjoyed this book. And your first question you've already answered. It kind of was about the bear management conflict. And so she recognized that you answered that one. But I love her second question, which is, can you tell us if you were to include an epilogue from Liz's point of view and from Grady's point of view, what are they and what are they up to now? So where where are they? Oh, we've lost you now. Maybe
Oh dear.
move back.
Move back. Okay. Is this better?
Mm, right there, maybe try.
Okay. Is this better? Oh,
Am I the only one that's not hearing well, or is everybody sort of in the same boat? Yeah, everybody's kind of in the same boat. Um, yeah, there seems to be like a sweet spot.
okay.
There.
I was worried about our internet. Are we here? How's that?
That's still kind of cutting out again.
Okay.
There, perfect. Right there.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I will try to stay right here.
Okay.
So I am working on a sequel. And I don't want to give too much away, but I can certainly say that both Grady and Liz will figure in the sequel.
Okay. Okay. Well, I love it. So yeah, as soon as Michelle posed that question, I was like, well, yeah, we need to know more. Um, so we'll look forward to the sequel. Okay. Let's see. I scrolled down a little bit. Now I lost it. Yeah, and Scott and Madeline Russell specifically said sequel and a question mark. So now you've fulfilled our every dream. Oh, so Joel asked, and we actually talked about this a little bit in we do a little prep before we come on here, just make sure everything's working right. Joel wants to know about your house and the room that you're in. Uh-oh, we've lost you again. So sorry.
Oh, well, I'm sorry too. I was East Glacier connection. Is this better? How about here? Okay.
Shoot.
Let me make sure. Okay. Is this better?
That's better.
Okay. So my family and I have a little hotel in East Glacier, and I staked out some territory when I married my husband. It made it my office, and it's this little room on the second floor.
Uh-oh, we're losing you again. I don't know. I hate to ask you to get off and then come back in again.
Okay.
Oh, and now there we had you.
Okay.
Wait, why don't we try it for a little bit longer, and then I might ask you to exit Zoom and come back on. Sometimes that helps.
Okay.
But we've got you now.
Okay. So my family and I, we have a little 10-room motel in East Glacier. And when I married my husband, I staked out this little bit of territory on a skin story that I'm pretty medieval about guarding as like my own little space. So this is actually where I did a lot of the writing of the novel. And I have a wonderful view out kind of onto the plains um, to the east of East Glacier.
Lovely. Okay, so we heard most of that. I wonder, Colleen, if you would be willing to exit and then come back in and just see if that works a little bit better. And we'll entertain ourselves while you're gone.
Amy, do you want to talk about, do we have a giveaway?
Ooh, great idea. Great idea. We do have a giveaway, and today we're giving away, we have a lovely Going to the Sun Road lanyard, which I think will come in very handy for somebody's keys or gym membership or whatever you put on a lanyard these days. So I don't have it with me. I think it's in the office. So we have Going to the Sun Road lanyard, and then we also have some Glacier stickers that we're going to send off. And the winner tonight is Janet Yeager. So Janet, look forward to that. Um, look at Janet's surprise and oh, that was perfect. So
Thank you. You guys are the best. Thank you so much.
thank you
And
for
I
being
think,
here,
Oh,
yeah,
I
and
love
we'll
it.
get that off in the mail to you.
Perfect.
and
Thank you.
while we wait for Colleen to reconnect and hopefully she can reconnect, East Glacier sometimes is a little bit tough in terms of the interwebs. What I would be curious to know is who, what was your favorite character? Just put it in the chat. I would love to know whose favorite character was. And that could be because they were a terrible person or is because they were the hero that you're championing. So maybe just chat that in. And I know Colleen just joined us. But I think it'd be fun for her to see is like as the story has so many characters, who grabbed your interest the most and were you, fascinated or excited by their outcome? And Amy, did you have any other questions for Colleen or did you want me to take over on questions?
How about I throw it back to you, Stacy? There are more questions, but maybe we can mix things up a little bit and come back for questions.
Perfect. I see a lot of folks rooting for Clancy. Well, yes, we're gonna talk about Clancy. I think one of the things that was so underlying and not underlying, it was part of Clancy's story was the death of her brother, Sean. And so one of the things, in there, Sean's death was part of her identity. And there was a conversation where Robert said, you get to live long enough, it's going to happen. Someone you care about will wind up dead and you'll never be the same. And I think that is so true for anyone because whether it's a sibling, whether it's a friend, whether it's a parent, whatever it is, I feel like when that death happens, there's a before and an after, and there's a new normal. And to see how she coped with it, and to be in those same stomping grounds that she spent so much time with her brother, they had so many adventures together. That's who she was, her relationship with her brother and not being there when he passed and now going on the search for Ezra. And so if you want to share a little bit more as you developed their relationship and what kind of your thoughts were there.
Yes, definitely. I felt like it was um, important for, just the idea of having the the first image that I had that started the book was a trail crew worker going to rouse her buddy and finding his tent shredded. And then what happened. But it also was important that the person who found the shredded tent, that got to them for really important reasons. And this idea that Ezra had gone to great lengths to recover her brother's body, which, meant so much to her as it would probably to any of us. And there are just those people who show up for you when you've lost someone, and they do these things that you will always remember and always be grateful for. So I wanted that to also be part of their relationship so that when he did do this horribly disappointing, awful thing, that wasn't the whole of him. because all of us are more than the worst thing that we've ever done. But it was important that then there's this horrible worst thing that he's done, that there's also some sort of balancing wonderful thing that he'd done. And it seemed that one of the ways to do that would to have him be involved at a low point in her life where she was very almost indebted to him for what he had been able to provide her and her family.
Yeah. And as people are sharing that they really, they love Clancy, was there a particular character that you were particularly like, oh, I'm so excited writing the storyline? Was there a character or relationship that you just kept going back to and being like, yes, I really like this story, or I want to make it better, or, because I feel like there has to be some character that you connected with.
Oh, all of them, definitely. And like I had alluded to earlier, like with Maureen, there was this idea of, someone having cancer or faking cancer, I guess. And then the very endearing husband building the trail. With many of the relationships, actually the Grady character was initially not such a nice guy. And he really evolved. So, over the course of spending years and years with these people, many of them changed and I got to know them better. And then some of them just showed up out of nowhere, like Vera, the administrative assistant. I'd been working on the novel probably a good 9 years when all of a sudden, like, Vera showed up, and it's like, oh my gosh, Vera has a story here. Like, she has a perspective that not everyone does. And some of the lines that she used were lines that my students at Blackfeet Community College had told me. There had been a mauling that a friend of mine was involved in, and my students were like, well, what do they expect when they're out there walking around in the bear's living room? And I was like, well, there's a perspective I would not have come to by myself. So Vera was a lot of fun to watch her evolve, and that whole story of having been adopted and then unadopted. Like, you just realize people have been through heartbreaking things and they persevere, and it's encouraging.
No, I love it. Yeah, there's just so many storylines, and it's kind of like you almost have a soft spot for Lane because you can picture this young guy who's just so excited to be wearing the green and gray. I love, kind of the storyline that he keeps putting on his flat hat and they're like, kind of making fun of him. But it is just, you're like, you want him to succeed, but you're like, oh, Lane, can you catch a break?
Yes, I knew a couple Lanes who were like, they were just so enthusiastic and like so happy to be in Glacier. And honestly, I was a little Lanish as well. And he was one of those where he like wearing the chin strap, the flat hat chin strap under his chin. I actually had done that. And I don't know if people are familiar with Dick Mattson, but he was long time ranger, and he did the first ascent of Pompelli's Pillar, and he lives here in East Glacier. Anyway, he was the one. He saw me walking at Two Med, and he's like, let's not wear our hat like a little sunshine girl. So yeah, I really do relate to all the characters and love them all for various reasons. You'd mentioned Penelope earlier, and I knew a few Penelopes too, like people who would like bring product into the backcountry to wear. And you just gotta kind of love it. Like, I would not be willing to have that kind of weight in my pack, but there are people who are, and they get to love Glacier too.
Yeah. And then honestly, Patrick to me was a little bit of an unsung hero because he's, I think, so typical of a lot of the folks I know, and just they're hikers, they're climbers, they spend all of their time in Glacier, they know the terrain, they know kind of rescue skills. And he's paired up kind of in this hot mess situation, but it was kind of genius for the park to be like, hey, can you go help with this search? And he kind of, even though him and Turner didn't have a great relationship, he still had that human compassion of like, okay, the guy's not eating or he's struggling. And then to help Liz, it was kind of fun to watch that and to see that transition into maybe a position with MPS. I was like, that was kind of a cool turn.
Those two really came around. in early drafts, they just butted heads. And then as I wrote more, it's like, these two are gonna when you spend all day on the trail with someone, you learn more about them than you do with just these cursory, like, you work for the Park Service and I live in town kind of relationships. So that was a fun one to watch evolve for sure.
And I see a question. We are getting close on time. We have about 9 minutes left, but I see Janet asking you about Muffy, that bringing a dog into the park, especially backcountry. Is that a common occurrence? Dogs in the backcountry are a huge no-no, and I think that's why it was kind of significant in the storyline, especially with her relationship with Mac and being like, why is there a dog in the backcountry? But if you want to talk a little bit more about that, Colleen.
Yes, my kids accuse me of being like Paul Blart Mall Cop in the park because if we're hiking and we encounter someone with a dog, I tell them they have to get rid of their dog. They have to hike it out. It's because dogs carry parvo and they can transfer it to wildlife. So there are reasons behind all the rules. I think it's one of the rules that people aren't used to because on a lot of public lands in Montana, dogs are more than welcome, but that's not the case in Glacier. And that was one of those things that I had to really make the case for my editor and my publisher because they didn't understand like how shocking that would be for Penelope to like see a dog in Glacier. I think she says something about like, it might as well be a penguin. More and more when I'm lucky enough to get out and hike, I see dogs on the trails, and that is really vexing to me. But Muffy, as a character, poor Liz, I think when she discovered Muffy at Max, muzzled and leashed and tethered, and she really did feel like Muffy was kind of her last remaining friend and loyal entity in the world. So she took her with her. But that was one of those things where I feel like if you aren't super familiar with Glacier, the idea of a dog being in the park might not be quite as shocking for you. So that was one I had to try to translate for everybody, I guess.
But yes, it is a huge no-no, very limit. I mean, no trails allowed. There's one, it's like the bike trail in Apgar, which is also it's grizzly country. Don't really need your bears and your dogs having interactions. Amy, you were also fading on the interwebs, welcome to Glacier Country, but do you have some more questions and we'll see how you're sounding?
Okay, let's give me a go. Am I back on?
Yes, you're
Okay,
sounding
good.
good. And Colleen, you're sounding
At
great.
least for the moment. Okay, let me see what I missed. I just wanted to point out that Gracie added some of Colleen's events, upcoming events. In fact, there's one tomorrow in East Glacier. Colleen, do you want to talk any more about your events?
Sure, maybe a little bit. So I do these book talks and signings at Glacier Park Lodge in East Glacier. They have me there starting at 6. I can't say that I will have a whole bunch of different things to say at the book talk. Like we've kind of covered a lot of what I talk about um, during the book talk here this evening, but they're fun. And Glacier Park Lodge is always a beautiful place to, hang out and have a cocktail. I'll also be signing books at Montana House in Apgar on the 30th of July. And then again in September. Anyway, it sounds like Gracie's putting the dates on the chat. So that's wonderful. And one of my favorite things about this, having a book out, is I really enjoy speaking to readers one-on-one. I've always found it a little ironic that like the reward for spending a lot of time alone in a room is like, yeah, you get to talk in front of people, which for some of us is not, where we're the most comfortable. But the one-on-one, like at book signings, I love interacting with readers and answering their questions and finding out their stories too, and stories that they have about the park as well. It's been really enjoyable.
Awesome. I'm going to ask one more question, and then I feel like the combination of you and I is not good because as soon as I came on, then we lost you a little bit. Are you losing me too?
Yeah, just a
Or can
little.
you hear me?
I can hear
Yeah.
you now.
I think our two internets are working too hard.
Right.
But I wanted to know, are there any hidden secrets to Sean's death? And maybe we'll find out more in the sequel. Or do we know everything about?
Oh, that's a good idea. I hadn't thought about that. Oh, thank you, Amy. I have to say, I get the
That's all
best
Tina.
ideas.
That's all Tina. So give her credit.
Okay, thank you, Tina. I'm gonna make note of that. I hadn't even thought about that. That's a really good idea.
That might be a whole nother book. I mean, who knows?
It could be like a prequel.
There we go. Okay, I'm gonna throw it back to Stacy so that maybe things are louder in everybody's world.
Yeah, you guys are sounding awesome. Thank you for hanging in there with the internet. You just never know what's happening between Big Fork and East Glacier, and I'm over here in Columbia Falls. So, Colleen, a little bit of a speed round to wrap this up. These are just going to be a couple of quick questions for you to kind of just, answer. Okay, the mountains or river?
Mountains.
All right. Do you have a particular favorite peak in the park?
Um, oh, I have so many. I did so when I went to name each of my children, they all got a mountain in a park. So my oldest son is named after Mount Henry. My daughter's named after Merritt, and my youngest son is named after Reynolds.
I love it. Okay. And I wouldn't doubt there's also a lot of folks on the call. You always hear people who name their kids after Glacier or pets or whatever it might be. I love it. Okay. Summer evening by the campfire or winter by a fireplace? Okay. I think she said fireplace. We're losing you, but we're going to hang in there for 2 more minutes. Okay. Favorite
Winter and
wildflower?
wood stove.
Perfect. Sounds perfect for your
Shooting
area.
star.
Shooting star. I love it. Okay, and then we'll wrap it up. If you want to share, do you have anything that you're reading right now?
Yes, I mentioned I'm reading The Wolverine Way
That's right.
by Doug Chadwick, and I highly recommend it. He describes winter at many glacier and skiing across the frozen lakes to check the wolverine traps. It's just extraordinary. It's a wonderful read. I also really loved um, Diane Boyd's A Woman Among Wolves, which I got to participate in the book club for that one. That was great too. So those are a couple wonderful glacier books.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thanks to everyone for joining us. And I love that even if you haven't finished reading the book, I don't know that we necessarily gave away too many spoilers. So if you haven't finished it, hopefully you're that much more hooked to figure out what on earth we were talking about in some of these cases. Keep reading. Thank you so much for joining us, Colleen. Thank you to everyone joining us. We do have upcoming Glacier conversations and book clubs for the remainder of the year. So hopefully we will see you all at one of those. And now we're super excited to see the continuation of the story because now we have Sean's story that apparently might evolve a little bit along with Liz and Grady's. So this just got really exciting. I see you're going to go start clicking away right now. And on that note, pen, pencil, or computer?
I write everything first in longhand, pen on paper, and then I get another draft as I put it on the computer.
I love it. Well, thank you, Colleen, and hope to bump to you at one of your future appearances. And everyone, thank you. Have a wonderful evening. If you haven't been to Cut Bank or Med, definitely put that next on your list. I know it's next on mine. And so we can go see some wildflowers and kind of bring a little bit more of the story to life for us individually. So thank you all. Have a great evening and thanks for supporting the Conservancy.
Thank you.